Hi, we're taking a look at homework 5.5 and some of the questions that you guys asked about that. We're going to move to number 3. So number 3 says we have an equilateral triangle, so that means all 3 sides are the same length, and it has a height of 10 inches. How long is one of its sides? And so then it has this hint that says, take the triangle and make it into 2 congruent triangles. So actually, I know that if I were to take the height of this triangle, I've made it into a right triangle. I also know that since all 3 sides are the same, I'm going to call this x. Well, I have bisected this side, so we're going to call this x over 2. Since we have a right triangle, we could use Pythagorean theorem. We know that x over 2 squared, quantity squared, plus 10 squared would equal its hypotenuse squared. So x squared over 4 would plus 100 would equal x squared. So 100 will equal, what would that be, 3/4 x squared. So 400 over 3, if I multiply by 4 and divide by 3, would equal x squared. I can take the square root of that. So the square root of 400 would be 20 over root 3, and I will have absolute value of x, which if I rationalize that denominator, I know I end up with 20 root 3 over 3 if I rationalize that denominator. I also know that when I go and look at this piecewise, only one piece applies because I'm referring to distance. So the negative piece doesn't make any sense, and that is inches. I'm guessing on number 4 why you were saying you were getting the wrong answer on number 4 is you didn't read the question correctly. So it actually ultimately asks you how many feet does the person save by walking on the diagonal sidewalk. So once you find x, you have to do a little bit of work to figure that part out. So to find x, once again, this is a right triangle. So 2x quantity squared plus x squared will equal 32 squared. So 5x squared will equal 32 squared. So 32 squared divided by 5, 204.8. Take the square root. Approximately 14.311. I would have absolute value, but once again, when I do the piecewise, I know one of those pieces will not apply because I can't have a negative distance. Okay, so that's what x is. So it asks you about how many feet a person would save by walking on the diagonal sidewalk. Well, the diagonal sidewalk is 32 feet. So I need to figure out what the distance would be if they walk the L shape. So that would be 2 times 14.311 plus 14.311. Okay, so I get 42.933. So if I wanted to know how many feet they would save by walking on the diagonal, I would need to subtract 32 from that. So they save, and this is approximate, so 10.933 feet are saved by walking on the diagonal. As we're looking at number 2, and I may not set the whole thing up for you, but this says the town is planning mainly a playground, but you have a wall on one side. So here's kind of the hint for you. When you put this 100 feet of fencing, you're only going to be putting that fencing on 3 sides. So that's kind of a hint for you. The other hint, or the other problem I was asked about is 1C. And so this was explained in your Ed puzzle from Wednesday. But what we're finding here, when we find the average rate of change, we're really finding your change in your y over your change in your x. And so if I look at this problem, my y value is height, my x value is time, and I want to find what happens from a time of 2 and a time of 0. So those are actually x coordinates if you think about it in terms of rate of change. So I would need to plug 2 into this function to get the y. Well, I see that that's 235, or 0, excuse me. I would need to plug 2 in. And I'm getting 171. So if I want to find average rate of change, I would take the change in your y value, so that would now be 171 minus 235. And we get negative 32. And the units of that, well, height is in feet, and time is in seconds. And so if you think about it, that would make sense, because from the time of 0 seconds to 2 seconds, this wrench is falling, and so that's what the negative represents. So it's really falling 32 feet per second during that time period. I also heard number 7, so we'll look at it quickly. So I'm going to set this equal to 0, which would be 4x squared minus 7x minus 1. And there are no factors of 4 and 1. That would give you a 7 in the middle. So that means I will be completing the square. I'm going to have to factor 4 out of the middle term here. You can double check by multiplying those to make sure you have the same thing. From here, I'm going to go ahead and put plus a blank in. And then I'm going to also go ahead and subtract that blank to balance it. All right, so I like to think backwards. So I know to get up x squared, I would need x and x. I'll need a minus and minus. So then I think, what number would I add to itself to give me 7/4? Well, that would be 7/8. That would give me 14/8, which is 7/4. So to figure out what I would add to that side, I would have to do 7/8 times 7/8. So that's 49/64. But remember, to balance, that 49/64 is being multiplied by 4, which is actually meaning I need to balance with subtracting 49/16. Okay, I'm kind of out of room, so I'm going to come down here. So 0 will equal 4 times x minus 7/8 squared. And negative 1 minus 49/16, you get a common denominator, so minus 65/16. So I have it in vertex form, and from here I'm going to solve. So I would take 65/16 equals 4 times x minus 7/8 squared. Divide by 4. Take the square root. I can't take the square root of 65. There is no perfect square that goes into 65, so it's going to stay root 65. Square root of 64 is 8. And I would have absolute value of x minus 7/8. From here, I need a piecewise. And so now I can write my two equations. I'll have x minus 7/8 equals root 65/8. And the opposite of x minus 7/8 equals root 65/8. So solve from here. Divide by negative. And so we can see I get 7/8 plus root 65/8 and 7/8 minus root 65/8.